Hello, everybody. Are you with me today? Yes. Very good, very good. We are going to be distributing a one-pager. You can wait before you review it, but I'm going to make some formal comments to you and really thank you for all being here. I think it's reflected of our university and the values that we have. So my talk is entitled, and no slides today. If you remember last year, I had some slides. I showed my parents and etc. But my talk is entitled Public Policy, Health, and Social Justice. And I'm really happy to celebrate Black History Month. And you do know that this month belongs to all of us, correct? Okay. So I was chatting with some folks and reflecting that I've been Upstate's president for 1 year. Time does fly. And certainly I recall with fondness that celebration. But I was very new to the institution and really did feel very welcomed. And I shared with you, as I said, my personal history, my background, my parents' journey as immigrants here to this country, and reflected on the lives of those who had influenced my path, the path that I had chosen both as a physician and as a Black woman. This year, I choose to highlight the vision of Dr. Martin Luther King. And yes, I do celebrate education, and Dr. King was an excellent educator, a real scholar of history, and I think I've rarely heard the words as eloquent as his. So I will reflect back. Many of you have heard Dr. King's, that Dr. King made the comment, which is a pretty controversial comment, is the following, that the U.S. government was and is, quote, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. Some of you who are my generation, I won't ask you to raise your hands, okay, would have heard that comment. The context was admittedly 50 years ago, exactly 50 years ago, actually. And it is important, though, not to forget history as we contemplate the present and the future. In a speech delivered by Dr. King on April 4th of 1967 at Riverside Church in New York City, and I hope you've had a chance to visit Riverside, so for many of us it's a dear place. Exactly 1 year before his untimely death, he chose to speak out in opposition to the war in Vietnam. Now, I am a child of the 60s and 70s, and for those of you who haven't lived through those times, forgive me for choosing that as an example, but I hope you take the time to review the history of Vietnam. And although Dr. King's speech, this particular speech, is not as well known as his other speeches, in reviewing his words this year, I was struck by not only do those words continue to be relevant given the passage of time, it is striking how those words are in fact timeless. The background for his speech I'd like to go over, and it is entitled Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, and it's as follows. In 1967, Dr. King had been in the public limelight for his extraordinary leadership. Most of you are aware of Dr. King's legacy, but during his celebration, this celebration of Black History Month, it bears repeating. Dr. King was born Michael King Jr., January 15th of 1929, and died April 4th of 1968, and I did the calculation. He was 39 years old. And while I was 12 when Dr. King was killed, and I remember the letter I wrote to Coretta Scott King, I didn't realize how young he was because for me, he was so much older. But as I reflect now, he was a young man at 39. And he was, as you know, an American Baptist minister and an activist who was leader of the Civil Rights Movement. He's best known for his role in the advancement of civil rights using nonviolent civil disobedience. Dr. King led the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott at the age of 26. Yeah, I'm feeling old today, okay? and helped found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957. I was 2 years old. Now, I gave away my age. This is terrible, okay? And he served as the first president. He led an unsuccessful 1962 struggle against segregation in Albany, Georgia, and helped organize the 1963 nonviolent protests in Birmingham, Alabama. For those of you who've not been to Birmingham, I paid that visit a few years ago. It's worth the trip, okay? King also helped to organize the 1963 March on Washington, where he delivered his most famous speech, I Have a Dream. On October 14th of 1964, he received the Nobel Peace Prize for combating racial inequality through nonviolent resistance. In 1965, he helped to organize the Selma to Montgomery marches. And the following year, he and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference took the movement to Chicago to work on segregated housing. And I recognize those who are continuing that battle now, Bill Simmons. Then, in the final years of his life, Dr. King expanded his activism to include opposition to poverty and to the Vietnam War. It is noted by many that in doing so, he alienated some of his strong liberal allies, especially with the rendering of the April 4th, 1967 speech. The criticism of his allies reflected the opinion of those who felt at the time that as a civil rights leader, he should keep to the agenda of that movement, right? And not venture to comment on Vietnam. Dr. King and others, such as Malcolm X, John Lewis, and Muhammad Ali, who opposed the war, rejected the compartmentalization of their leadership, and in so doing, not only reaffirmed the basic principles of civil rights, but joined with other visionary global leaders who refused to be defined by others, but affirmed their right to be citizens of the world, which is what I spoke to you about last year. Some of Dr. King's words from his Vietnam speech struck me, and I thought I would share them with you. He said, "My conscience leaves me no other choice." He said, clergy and laymen concerned about Vietnam, reflecting on the growing number of folks who felt that they needed to comment. And he said, "I found myself in full accord," and then said these famous words, "When silence is betrayal, that time has come for us in relation to Vietnam." And I would ask you to examine your conscience with respect to silence in our current predicament. He said other things that stick with me, even when pressed by inner truths, meaning he is, like many of us, trying to reflect inward into what makes sense, what values we have, and our own self-integrity. He said, mesmerized by uncertainty, but we must move on. So I reflect as a university where we try to have the tricky balance, right, of balancing what's important, what's our mission of higher education, and do we get frozen by uncertainty and lack of action? He concluded, "We must speak, break the silence of the night." He talked about apathy of conformist thought and concluded, "The high ground of a firm dissent based upon the mandates of conscience and the reading of history." And this is Black History Month, so I think history is relevant to our discussions today. So I choose today to highlight the stance by Dr. King because of our current local, regional, national, and global realities require of us to be citizens of the world and to allow our conscience to guide our positions as individuals, as health professionals, and to speak out for human rights. In 2017, while we have incredible talent and diversity, and most of you who know me as you know that I'm a perpetual optimist. It's very hard for me to look at the negative side of things. I really start from the positive. Also, being a pediatrician, kids force you to do that, okay? In 27, though, despite those talents and diversity, we're nonetheless still combating the following: economic, educational, social segregation. We are combating poverty among all races and ethnicities in our rural communities, our native lands, our inner cities, our suburban communities. We are still confronting health disparities which by definition reflect injustices in our healthcare delivery system and the lack of access to the innovation of this incredible science that we have, right? We are a health science university. I mean, genomics, epigenetics, the mechanisms of things such as stress that we didn't even envision before. We now have the science for that, but we must apply it. We are facing the prejudices and now the application of laws against our refugee populations who seek refuge in our country. These refugees and immigrants, such as I am, from all over the world, are in fact part of the fabric of our country and have helped to contribute to the incredible creativity of our land, and we must celebrate that diversity. At the State University of New York, we define an agenda at the 64 campuses. You know, we are one of 64 campuses, and we are one of 4 academic medical universities. We define an agenda rooted in the belief that diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the base of everything we do. That agenda must translate to transformative education for those who are medical educators. Thank you for the work that you do. And public policies that recognize the term that we've sort of gotten to know now, but we haven't applied yet, which is the social determinants of health, such as the adverse effects of health on poverty and racism, and we must seek to ameliorate those conditions. I need to reflect back a little as well. More than 50 years ago, the advances in public health, such as improvements in sanitation, nutrition, prevention of illness, yes, through immunizations, don't forget it. The data are there to show us. And reduction of exposure to environmental toxins, expansion of primary care, I can go on, all help to reduce morbidity and mortality, that is, illness and death, okay? The approaches were very clear. They were evidence-based. They were objective, based on data, and then the application of that information to improve lives. Please don't forget that, because we are a place of higher education. That means information is important in guiding our steps forward, so that when you find yourself in the midst of controversy, speak about the facts and objectively reflect that. And diverse opinions are good. It's a good thing to disagree with each other, but we must not mistake facts from non-facts, okay? We must not take steps backwards in forgetting the important public policies that have improved lives, such as Social Security and Medicare, universal health insurance for those 65 and older that reduce poverty in the elderly population. But we must move forward in applying those lessons to all populations during the lifespan. And I attest to you that universal health care is a right and not a privilege. I invite you to join me at the second presidential symposium entitled Society and Health, and please mark down those dates, although we will send you a save the date. March 30th and 31st at the Biotech Accelerator. I want to make a special appeal to our students. Can I have students just raise your hand? Students of what, across the college, please raise your hand. Students, wherever you're studying, students. Okay, if you didn't know you were special, know that you are special, right? Because you are going to lead the future. So I want students to join in the critical conversations that take place regarding your educational trajectory and in the context of broad societal debates. I want you to heed the words of Martin Luther King. Do not stay silent and do not stay on the sidelines. You are our leaders, all of you. And please, finally, I want to state the following. I want to acknowledge that we can claim for ourselves the identities of our particular heritage. I shared my heritage with you last year, right? I talked of Haiti and my parents and, all sorts of things. And these are the things that for all of us, wherever we are, it enriches our lives and our perspectives from language to culture to beliefs, religious or otherwise, racial, sexual, and other descriptions that we select or we prefer how we describe ourselves. These are good things. But simultaneously, let's reaffirm that we do not use differences to divide us and or to obscure our purpose. So we are an institution of higher education. We will use our knowledge to do good and to be just. And I'm so happy to be here among you to celebrate this important month. Thank you.